Hey everyone, it's Joe Glines here in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, and Jackie Stuck here from Copenhagen, Denmark.
I can't believe it's August and it's our 37th webinar with AutoHotkey. Someone was just asking us a minute ago if we are the creators of AutoHotkey. Like, no, we both, Jackie and I, we were actually looking at it the other day. It's been 4 years or so, Jackie, that we've been talking and working together now.
Yeah, sounds about right. Yeah.
But we're both passionate, love it, and just love to work smarter, not harder. So we decided to start having monthly webinars, just kind of teaching ourselves as well as other people of how to use AutoHotkey, be more efficient, and find cool ways to save time. So yeah, you can connect with us on LinkedIn. Oh, by the way, also I'll either tonight or tomorrow I'll send out all the resources and links to the recording video. So don't be crazy trying to write notes on everything. Don't worry about that. There's 43 registrants. There's a lot of people that watch this, of course, later because it's a worldwide thing, and we appreciate everyone everywhere. If you, like you said, we start off everyone muted. Not that we think we're amazing. It's just if we get more than 2 to 3 people talking at one time, it's mayhem. So just raise your hand if you have a question or dump it into the chat, which I realized I don't have my chat up. Where's my chat? There it is. Okay. There we go. People are already answering our questions. Great.
Yeah, it's perfect.
And
all kinds of stuff has been in the chat already.
Yeah, I've been missing out. This is why when sometimes one of us won't make the call and one person's trying to lead the entire webinar. Man, it's not easy doing it all by yourself. There's so much going on. But let's get going. So first off, we'll just keep talking. We have a little AutoHotkey podcasts, and these are the last. So we're almost up to 30 now. This one, the ways to save your settings to your script, I thought was pretty interesting. Your cache DLL issue was just a fascinating overall programming issue, which I don't know how you solved it. If you figured it out, that was amazing to me. But good lessons learned there.
Happy I did. Yeah, it really was. But yeah, communicating with users of your script, that was a good one as well.
Yeah,
I think we got a bit off topic on that one, but still.
Yeah, us off topic? No way. If anyone cares, there's the I do have a Udemy course now with and Jackie and I have one for hot strings, but this one's on the intro to AutoHotkey.
Yeah, a good one at that.
It's a good start. I got it at some point here in a couple. Well, I was hoping about now, but I got a lot more stuff landed on me, so I don't know when I'm going to start my intermediate one. But and it's on topic because I don't want to give the thing away, but it's related to some of the stuff we're going to talk about today. So first off, we always start off with a script highlight. This is one that I just happened to do a couple weeks ago. The A to Z database is a tool that I access through my library. So if you want to have access to getting and renting lists, you can check out your local library and see if they have access to this thing. But when I go there, let me actually, I don't know if I can do this live. It's going to have me log in. Let me move it over. Oh, that's just the overall website. But you can download like lists of contacts and target off of like NAIC codes or SIC codes or zip codes, whatever you want. What was happening though was you can download up to 1,000 at a time. But what would happen is I would hit, there's 25 per page. And so I automated get the 25, click next page, 25, next page, 25, next page, and you get to 1,000. I say download that file, which was great. I had that all automated, but it didn't go deselect all of them. And so then I would have had to have gone back and deselect each one on each page, and that was ridiculous. So I said, you know what, I'm just going to select all 25 on the page and then download that 25 and then clear it and then go to the next page and get the 25 and download it. Well, I ended up with a lot of files. And here's an example. So I was helping out a guy starting a roofing company. And so we get these files of their similar structure, right? They all have the same header. So each one of these has the header in it, right? A header row, and then the data. So there's 26 rows because there's 25 contacts And it was just like, okay, now I want to merge these together. Well, let me show you, just because it's fun, there's a really cool, easy way. Now, I demonstrated this one in a previous webinar, but I have it, if I do Control-Shift-P, it's going to do a command prompt in that directory for me, right? And that's one, I could try to find it, but it's a simple script, but it just makes a command prompt here. So with DOS, I can say copy star and then the extension .csv, and then the name of the file, so I'm going to call it merged.csv. And there, I've just appended all of those files that fast together, right? The problem with this is you'll see every 26th row or so, there's that header row. And of course, I could pop this into Excel, sort it, freeze the top row, and then sort it or remove duplicates using something, right? And that wasn't terrible, but it just annoyed me. So I decided, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a script to take care of this.
Yeah,
so
that's the way to do it.
That's the what?
That's the way to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'll give you guys, actually, you know what, here, let me grab this real quickly here. So here is a post that has the actual script. It'll be in the email that I send out tomorrow, or in the links to the email. But this is the script I did, and it's pretty simple, right? So first off, we're only run it once. If there's another instance running, just run it once. Set it. This just optimizes it to running it as fast as possible. Here we're going to select the file, and then this I wrote in a function because I had it twice, and I thought, I'm going to create a function that just says, hey, if the person didn't select something, just exit out of the script, right? So that's what I created, a function called canceled, and all it does is says if this comes back blank, then just basically stop processing the script. And then it goes through and says, okay, now let's get a list of all the files. Let me go ahead and run it. And so I'm going to I can point to them, select them all, and now say open. And then it's going to say, well, what do you want to merge them into? And make sure here you give it the extension. I could have copied the first file and use that extension, but I didn't make it that complex. But you hit OK, and now it actually just ran that file. Notice here, there's no header row. There's just the first one, right? So it merged it. If we look in here, you'll see it's almost the same size as this other one. It's just should be a little bit smaller, right? And that's because there's only one header row instead of 80 or however many files. And all I did, so I'm not going to go line by line, but I first read the first file entirely, and then I did a loop and said, hey, if it's the next file, skip the first row and then read the rest and append it into the file. And then just ask how you want to save it, or where you want to save it. Oh.
So I actually do all of the work before giving the user the input box to name it.
I guess I do. Yeah. Yeah, it's usually so fast no one notices, but you're right. I could have moved that out. There's no reason to have this here.
Yeah, it was just interesting because the box turned up as quickly as expected without me actually realizing it. But here I just saw the code and saw that it actually came after.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No, it's a good point, Jackie, is putting this right here would, oops, actually I would need that one too, right?
Yeah.
Oops, there we go. That way, it right after we ask the files you want to select, then say give us the file name. Of course, I could create a little GUI to do all of this for me, but this took me probably like 30 minutes to write, and now I actually use it quite a bit. So it was a cool little handy script.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it did seem very useful.
Geekdude was saying you can open a command in a folder in Windows 10 without script. You can hit Control L. Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, that still seems that seems like a lot to remember for me. But that's cool. Thanks for sharing it, Geekdude. Yeah. So yeah, it's simple. And then the other thing I did was if there were illegal characters in the file name, like backslashes or a colon or a question mark, it will replace them with an underscore. I'll actually replace my underscore, and then if I remember right, I think I have a trim. Yeah, trim. If there's a space or an underscore at the end of either side, it trims those out too, because I didn't want to have that.
Yeah.
All right. So that was that. And all right. So now let's get on to kind of our overall topic. So before we jump into actually, talking about learning really any topic at all, let alone AutoHotkey, I learned this on my undergrad. It's a great way to think about things. That there are 4 stages of competence, right? There's the unconscious incompetence, and that's just the person doesn't have any clue whatsoever, and this can be really dangerous because the person doesn't realize they don't know what they don't know. Jackie, why don't we alternate? Why don't you do the next one?
Yeah, there's conscious incompetence, which is, I should put here, awareness. They know they don't know what they're doing, which is a good way of putting it. I think a good amount of people are there.
I hope so, right? A lot of people are smart enough to realize they don't know what they're doing, so they don't dive into stuff that they don't know, right? And then there's the conscious competence, right? And that's where you're actually learning, but through focused effort, you can actually do pretty good work, but you got to pay attention to what you're doing. Yeah,
absolutely. And I'd say that's mostly what people who are learning, people in school or who want to really focus on learning a specific skill would be at about there. And then there's the unconscious competence, as you put it, mastery. They can do it in their sleep without conscious thought. That's of course putting it high for some, but yeah, it's an achievable level for some. That's sure.
Yeah, and I'd say so. My background is in statistics, market research, and statistics. So I did about 15 to maybe 20 years of being like a data scientist, and so I understand this. I can do the stuff like, I can be half asleep and not paying attention, but it's so ingrained into me now. I don't really have to think that hard to do it. Actually, my friend Dr. Cook and I, we worked on a survey like 2 days ago. We had an idea. He wrote a first draft. Last night we reviewed it. Today I programmed it. We're done. Like, we did stuff that would take normally weeks, for people to do in a few hours, because both of us we know what we're doing, right? And it was just so easy. And of course, we also we work well together, which really helps.
Yeah. And always there's more things to consider.
Yeah. And then so in this book, this is where Brad. I don't think Brad's on. I haven't seen him. Maybe he is. Maybe I missed him.
It doesn't seem he was on.
But he had sent me a link to a video, which is on the next page here, but from this guy, Josh Kaufman. This book was on 20 hours, the first 20 hours, how to learn anything fast. And in the book, he's talking about how this other guy, Malcolm Gladwell, had said in his book, Outliers, The Story of Success, talks about it takes around 10,000 hours of work to reach this unconscious competence, mastery level, right? And that's a scary, that's a lot of time.
Yeah, but I had heard the number before, so yeah, it must be something that has some kind of consensus behind it. Yeah.
But in his book, he talked about really kind of getting to this conscious competence level, and that through structure and through really focusing, generally you can, on any topic, and that's at first what we're going to talk about, like really doesn't apply to AutoHotkey or programming in general. It's just any topic. Like in the first 20 hours, if you spend your time well, you can learn anything, the soup to nuts of it in 20 hours of focused learning.
Yeah.
Which is not nearly as daunting.
No, and that's at least what he focuses on. You can actually become proficient in most things with 20 hours, where others would look to you to get some kind of help or guidance within reason, of course. But yeah, with good 20 hours of focus, you can reach a level that is a good amount above someone who hasn't actually tried. Yeah.
So here's the thing, like before we get into it, and I was talking to several of you guys probably seen me, talk with him, and Dr. Cook, who I mentioned, his doctorate's in cognitive psychology, so in memory. And I had him review this deck with me. We're talking about, of course, he works with memory and learning and knowledge and what you can retain. And it was funny, we were going through the deck, and it's like, look, a lot of people really like to think they're learning rather than actually learn anything. A lot of people, like, they'll read, a paragraph in a book and then realize they have no idea what they quote unquote read, but they keep going forward. Right. And, that's not really learning. You can't say you really read the book if you don't remember like what was there and act on, possibly act on it.
Yeah. You need to move what you read or learn. And I think that when people read like stories, where they actually have images and they imagine what's happening within the story, there's a good chance of them actually staying within and remembering the story. Whereas when people read textbooks, something of a technical nature, there's not really anything to imagine. There's nothing to really create images in your mind. So if you don't apply what you're reading, it will become much harder for you to actually retain what you read.
No, that's a really good point, Jackie. I think that's so true. And imagine, you think about it, the poor kids, right? It's in a book I was reading this morning, it was talking about, experience is one of the things that, like in copywriting, people, the more experience you can get, the better, because you can help relate, understand stuff and act on it. And, kids who don't have a lot of experience, and when I mean kids, I mean, literally like 12-year-olds and such, they don't necessarily have a lot of experience to dwell on. And yet we put them in a classroom and expect them to focus and remember, everything. It's pretty amazing how much they do retain.
Yeah, and to me, it also comes down to coding, right? Where if you have learned to code or to programming within your mind from learning one advanced language or a language at some level, learning another, where at least some that are better than me say you just need to learn the syntax, is because now you actually have the structure you need to, in your mind, apply what you're reading. So yeah, that's how I view it, at least.
Yeah, and one of the things we'll talk about later a bit, but part of that, when I was reading, is when you first start digesting stuff, all of the brains, the way we work, when we learn something new, generally speaking, it's really hard to learn something totally new. We compare it to something else and kind of hang a hook on this is what it's like, right? And
yeah.
And to your point, Jackie, that the better you can do that, the easier it is to absorb new information, right? And those first couple days or the first times you're into it, that's where having like flashcards or having things that can help cement that. I actually have it. Where's my sticky? Right here, you guys will laugh because I don't know a lot of HTML yet. I use it a lot, but I have my little, well, now it's gone. I have a little here that says, elements are attributes, or elements have attributes, because I always got the two. I'm like, what the hell is an element and what's an attribute? To me, that they were kind of the same thing. Attributes are name value pairs. I'm like, oh, okay, because that, what? It's funny because I had nothing. I can't form a picture in my mind of what that means. So I think that's why I had such a hard time remembering that.
Yeah, and I have, that's a work thing, but I'm trying to have some very technical hands-on people learn how to use a more advanced data collection system. And the thing is that we have, like, in a bigger mechanical system, you have components under other bits and parts and stuff like that. And then when you come over and becomes coding and data, we call stuff objects. And to them, in Danish at least, those two words can become close to each other. And the thing is that object is just a much wider used term within a software program. So we have a data object here that holds all of these values and all of these things. And a component has one, and this machine has one, this one has two, this one has, and we're using multiple objects to represent this, and they just lose track completely.
Right, yeah. Yeah, it's funny because I think our webinar 2 back was on controls, and that was one for me also, the controls. I'm like, what the hell's a control? Like, it took me quite a while to like, well, just think of it as like an object, something that you can, I'm like, okay, now at least I have something to kind of think about it. But so getting back to this, in that, it's easy to do stuff and take the easy route out, right? So like parenting, it's easy to, when Johnny wants an ice cream, you say no, you say no, you say no, and then finally say yes, and you cave, right? Instead of actually staying firm, because in the long run, you're teaching him bad things. But if you actually stuck with it, he would in the long run, he would learn not to do this stuff. The point being, and not to beat anyone up on this webinar, but just in general, human nature, right? We generally don't spend the time to really develop a clear plan of what we want to do. Like, here's the first step in a goal, to achieve your goals. Have a goal, right? Have a clear goal. I almost had it in here was write it down, right? Writing it down. What's his name? Brian Tracy is a big one on that, of writing down your goals. Make sure you write them down, because, it'll really help you achieve them. And then determine a plan of how you're going to actually achieve them. And then, of course, take action on that plan.
Yeah. And to me, from my experience, the last step, to take action, that's the one that's people they hear it so much that I'm gonna take action, and if you haven't actually done the other two, the taking action becomes the issue. You will keep putting it off, procrastinate something over here. You have another video about the topic, because then you think you're learning instead of actually learning. So
right.
Yeah.
Right. And we'll get into this, but practice is a big part of it. All right, so let's get into Josh Kaufman in his actual lecture. He talks about in his book, and he this video here, which actually I'll put it in here not to distract you guys, so hopefully you don't go watch it right now. But that's the video where he talks through at a high level the approach. But there's basically, take your major goal and break it down into sub-skills, specific enough where you can practice them intelligently during controlled practices, remove emotional, physical barriers, mental barriers, and then working for like 20 hours. So that's yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, what I like about this one is the same thing we talked about recently in another webinar, where we talked about actually automating a task, where this was about the same thing you actually needed to do.
Right.
Take the task, find the smallest possible piece of the part of the task, and see how can I automate that small part of it by learning each part of what it actually is, with some practice intelligently and stuff like that, and using whatever you can from what you already know to remove barriers from doing that task automatically, and then simply practicing by running the code, seeing what happens. Did it do as I expected for this small task? So yeah, it's about the same thing.
It was actually why I thought of this topic in general for us, was because of what you just said, like that breaking it down, and it's the eating an elephant, right? Break it down to the smallest bit you can, because you take one bite at a time, right? The other one, which I think it's a little bit later, but we talk about, is don't worry about the first time you write, as Jackie's saying, is you break it down, when you start working on it, nobody, and I mean nobody, like I've talked to some really gifted programmers, and I've watched them work too, and they'll write something out, and then, you know, a couple hours later we're still going, and they'll come back and they'll rewrite like what they had originally wrote, because it, after a little bit, you have your thought process changes and you have a better understanding. And so that it's like they tell you with any sort of writing, right? Your first stuff is a draft, right? It's not going to be perfect. Don't try to make it perfect. You know, just start working on it.
Yeah.
All right. So let's get into, he actually, oh, this is the one other thing was that I love. It was a really, really critical, good point. You know, people talk about things having a steep learning curve, and it's usually implied to be a negative, but in reality, a steep learning curve is really a positive. Right? You don't want to have things that don't have a steep learning curve, because if they don't, that means they're going to take a really long time to learn, right? You want something that actually has, you know, your performance goes way up, as you know, in a short amount of time. It may be hard, right? Which we get, but the alternative is it takes you really, really long to learn something, which for me, that's not something I want to do.
I'd say one of the things that we've said many times over, because both of us actually loved learning, that was learn calm. Take something that you want to do either with Excel or with the Internet Explorer or whatever, and try to implement it in calm. There's a few AutoHotkey tutorials and stuff on that, and yes, the learning curve is steep on that, but if you manage, if you get to somewhere, you'll have actually interacted with kind of a deep part of Windows and that stuff, and you've been using objects, and you've used the dot syntax, and you've all kinds of different stuff will be kind of in that work plan if you try to actually learn to use that, and it can be done with pretty much baby steps and be extended on. So yeah.
Yeah, the other thing, when I was talking to Dr. Cook about this deck, he was bringing up, it's kind of, it's ironic because we're trying to help come up with ways, which we'll cover the next couple slides here, of how to make it easier. But what he was saying was, look, if it's not hard, if you don't struggle and if you don't fight to get it, it's even harder to actually remember and learn, right? We actually learn the things that are really hard. You know, that those are the things that stick in our brain, I should say. They actually stick in memory. And a part of it, I think, is that struggle that you went through to get it, and finally you get it, you know, achieved. And that's part of why it sticks in your head. So just make sure you just don't give up, right? Keep at it.
Yeah, I don't know why this popped into my head, but recently something I saw or read or whatever it was, with this, why do people feel like stuff in life is time is speeding up? The older you get, the quicker a year goes by. It is because you've already experienced most of your everyday life. So the brain is actually not lingering on those parts because, hey, I've already done this multiple times. So if a task is very easy, you'll not learn very much from it because your brain will simply not be very interested in it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, by actually taking on something that's more difficult, something that actually challenges you, I'm sure you'll actually learn way more.
All right. So in his book, and I've seen these on several other websites as well, so I don't feel like I'm ripping off his book, but I would say check out the book. You know, it was pretty inexpensive and decent. But here are the 10 principles of rapid skill acquisition. And that's what he basically calls his overall thing of learning quickly. So let me start off here with choose. First off, of course, choose something you're passionate about, right? A lovable project, something to solve. So anything that you're really emotionally attached to, it highly increases the likelihood that you'll succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can take number 2 here, where focus your energy on one skill at a time, right? Choose that one thing that you want to get better at. And it can, maybe not, I want to get better at AutoHotkey, but no, you want to get better at web scraping or merging files, CSV files, whatever.
Yep.
Find a task, maybe a work-related task, or your hobby, or whatever it might be, if you have one like that. And then just focus one thing hard.
On that one, Jackie, so I thought of an example in this where when Maestriath was teaching me his XML class, and the XML class relied upon XPath, he was teaching me how to use the class in addition to, at the same time, how XPath works. And holy cow, I had a really, like, I was so tired every time we go through these things. And I finally realized, because I'm learning two different things at one time. And they weren't, they were, and if I had just learned XPath first, or classes first, it would have been much easier if I had done them separate. In hindsight, I'm like, yeah, I really wish I had realized that at the time and said, let's just explain to me how XPath works and structure versus trying to use his class at the same time.
Yeah.
The third one, obviously is, what does good enough look like, right? Set your performance goals. Be very clear of, don't set something unrealistic like, I'm going to learn how to use classes, in 2 days, and be an expert, like as good as Jackie does with a lot of the stuff he writes, right? Like, that's just not going to happen, right? And you're just going to be not happy with yourself.
Yeah, I think we've tried to kind of be at a beginner level, right, and try to tell people at that level as well. Whereas at some point you might not be using other hotkeys very often, but that's not the same thing. It's not an important part of actually learning on hotkey. Using hotkeys, using hot strings, using what is actually the flow of a script, stuff like that, using a set timer, understanding how stuff actually. So yeah, setting a realistic performance level, that makes quite a lot of sense, because that will help you to do the next one, right? Where construct a skill into sub skills. Whereas if you, again, with coding, if you can actually take the task and just deconstruct it and say, what do I do first? Oh, I copy this thing. Instead of thinking, oh, I copy this, then I take it over here, then I do that, and then no, just start by getting a script that actually helps you copy whatever it is you're copying. And then the next thing, if you actually change windows with this, then build that into it. But take it at steps, like, I want to learn how to copy something from Word. Then start by actually finding out how you send a copy command to Word. Instead of having that entire, I have hundreds of pages I need to copy from Word, and I need to take them into this web page, and I need to log in, and I need to, yeah.
And part of back focusing more on the actual scripting side of things, we also know, generally speaking, you got to get work done, also. So you're more often better to just automate a little bit, and this time you do it, because of course, generally speaking, you don't automate things that you don't do over and over, right? It's just probably not worth the effort most of the time. So it's something that's going to, once a week or once a day, I have to do this thing. And so this pass through, I'm going to automate this little bit of it, right? And then maybe next week when I get back to it, now I'm going to, I already have that part done. I'm going to automate this part of it. Yeah, and it's much easier. It also helps with memory of breaking things up and coming back to them over time. Trying to learn doing too much at one time, you end up, and I've seen a Far Side, if you guys remember what Far Side was, the cartoon, but basically I used to do this in class sometimes too. I'd put my hand up and go, my brain's full, like I can't learn anymore because I'm going to start forgetting stuff, and I just know when I hit that wall that I just need to stop and actually take a break, take a nap. Sleeping on it's great. It helps it cement in your memory, and then come back the next day or a couple hours later.
Yeah, I actually believe that, taking a break from it, you don't always need to sleep on it. Just as you said yourself, I know you have some ways that you like to do it, where you might have something early in the morning and then stuff later and stuff like that. But yeah, absolutely. And to me, it's also with the 5 on the list here, where obtain critical tools. Yeah, I get if you're trying to learn something that's not coding, if you're trying to learn how to hammer in a nail, good idea to get a hammer, right? But yeah, just the idea of you don't need to always just start at AutoHotkey. Try and see if someone else has actually done it before you, and if they haven't, then try and see if others have done parts of what you're doing. Just like, instead of just accepting that nobody has done the entire task that you're trying to do, get the smaller parts, get the tools, get an IDE, get a good place to focus. So make sure that everything is what, remove barriers. I think I'm moving into the next one, but yeah.
It's but yeah, I think getting back to like an IDE, right? A good editor, and learning how to debug as well, right? Spend some time up front to learn how to debug, because man, that saves you time in the long run, right? It's not going to help you on that specific script, but spending a little time just to understand how to troubleshoot really helps in the long run, because otherwise you just end up burning a lot of time. The eliminate barriers, obviously. Even when I worked in the corporate world, and my boss, I'll say she was okay with it. She never said anything about it, but I'd tell him, I'm like, if you need something from me between like after 10 in the morning, before 2, like text me, because I turn off my email. And I'm like, I had my main clients that I, needed work. I said, look, I shut down my emails during times of the day so I can get work done. And often I was actually studying and learning AutoHotkey, but it's get rid of those distractions, because that is it's so easy to get off topic. And this gets back to I have a link to a video here at the end. It was talking a lot about discipline, and it really is learning discipline at learning how to learn, learning how to structure and have time to keep applying yourself. It's critical if you want to learn something.
Yeah, to me, I'm not sure where I'm at, but I'm looking at the 8 here, where I'm at least thinking about where the situation where I started learning AutoHotkey. I was in a place where I needed to enter a lot of data. It was pretty easily obtainable, and it actually just needed to be moved from that interface to that interface, and it was just manual doing it. But when I started learning AutoHotkey, I was in a 2-man office. We were only 2 guys there. And at the beginning, I didn't actually tell the other person about what I was doing. I was just trying to help myself get rid of a boring task. But at one point, I managed it. I can't say that right now. But it actually, I succeeded at doing a task so quickly that he actually ended up asking me how I did that.
Yeah.
Just because I needed to enter 10,000 whatever values into something, and he had believed it would take me days, right? Not because he was the one giving me the task, but yeah. And I did it over lunch while we were actually out of the office, because I started the script that I had built over many, many days, and checked, and I had maybe made, let's say, 1,000 semi-manually while building the actual script.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the end had confidence enough that, hey, it had just done 100 without crashing. And then I just started it, went to lunch, and when we came back, it was done, and I could get on with other things. And then he actually asked, and then I started showing him what I had done, and it ended up him becoming my fast feedback loop, because he then he felt was good at doing that, and we back and forth, and he had some coding knowledge, so it was quite a good, yeah. So I was able to both track what I was doing and measure the speed at which I was doing it. So yeah.
Did we skip over the dedicated time for practice though?
Maybe I just had an idea that you were talking about that.
No. Well, it's fine. It doesn't. So because I just want to make sure, because obviously it's one of the most critical steps, right? Is to if you can't, like here, if you want to, take an oath with me right now and say, I'm going to learn to do something, and I'm going to find a way, and it doesn't have to be every day. In his book, he says, look, if you can commit to 3 days a week doing 90 minutes per day, right, do that. Or if you can do it every day, do that. If you can't do it, if it's 2 days a week, right, 1 day a week, I think starts getting where it's not enough, where you might start losing. You're not learning enough fast enough. But, he recommends 90 minutes a day. I honestly, and not necessarily doing 90 minutes all at one time, because unfortunately nobody can really focus for 90 minutes, right? It's just humanly almost impossible to really focus. I mean, focus like, really work and do nothing else and understand and not have any sort of distractions. So do it in like 20-minute chunks, which is down into the line. So I'll cover both. But doing it in small chunks throughout the day, right? What I like to do is I'd have like 40 minutes in the morning, and then later in the day do like a little refresher of what I learned that morning, right? And dive in a little deep, because you usually need a little bit of time to get into something, to kind of work through it, and then have some practice things where you can do it. But don't just stop there on the practicing. Practice it a little bit at the end of the day, and then possibly a little bit in the next morning or the next day, just a little bit to help over you slept on it, help it refresh and stay and cement in your brain. You want to take the last one, Jack?
Yeah, but I do like the idea of doing it in short bursts, because I just feel like that probably will work better. Contra sitting there for an entire hour just trying to, but again, if you can get in the zone with something, at least that's how I see it sometimes with coding, then it can be a good idea to just keep going and not breaking it up. But depending on whichever situation, sure.
Let me chime in.
And I have,
quickly there, I was going to say, because we'll talk about it in 2 slides from now, I think. But he also mentions immersion, and hey, if you can spend like, a week just focusing on it, that all, you'll learn a lot. It's just most people don't have that kind of time, right? So this is the general approach of the rapid skill acquisition that he's taking. But you can learn a lot if you totally immerse in it, and that's all you do. But it's, again, you still want to have structure on that.
Yeah, to me, it's also, it compares on what you're trying to learn, right? Where if, let's say, I think his example in his video is the guitar, where he actually learns to play the guitar and a lot of stuff. But if it's with coding, 20 minutes for me in the morning to sit down and actually at the computer, find my IDE and get the focus and stuff like that, probably not going to happen. Where I would have a much better chance of finding maybe 1.5 hours at night to do something like that. And then I might still cut it into chunks of half an hour, but still, I do get the idea. And I had the same thing when I first read this last line earlier, with emphasize quantity and speed. Don't worry about perfection. Skill is a result of practice. Where with coding, I'm too much of a perfectionist. One of my biggest problems is getting it out there and kind of to myself saying, it's done, it's good enough. Mm-hmm. But again, quantity and speed might not work so well with coding. AutoHotkey might be more forgiving for jumping over stuff, but normally I'd say sure, do as I did when I was practicing and
let me help and see if I can help, because I understand exactly what you're referring to. Because line 8, where it's talking about the feedback loops, right? He talks about it because he actually talks about learning, I think it was PHP in the book. He has a chapter on it. And but programming is the ultimate feedback loop, because it either works or it doesn't work, right? Right away. Yeah. And in your example, you were talking a little bit different of the feedback you were getting from, did the actually overall, it's not the program run and not crash, it's did it achieve the goal, right? Which is, obviously really important too. I think here in the whole perfection, the way I was interpreting it was, don't try to write the perfect function, the first time, right? Don't try and write your script perfectly optimized the first time. Just get it to work, right? And just write it out. And then over time, you start seeing stuff and seeing patterns and better understanding the stuff. It's just that, but it takes repetition and practice to start seeing those. Because that's where, I was talking, and I think actually I asked you too, Jackie, but I was talking to Mace, I remember this. And I was like, I would always get embarrassed because I'd be writing stuff, I'd write my things, and then later I'd look back and go, oh crap, this could be a function. I should have written a function here, and I could, lose these Go subs, or I can do it this way, and I can, and he's like, oh, we all do that, right? We all, no matter what, you always realize a bit later, oh, this is really the same thing as that one. I have two functions that really they're the same damn thing. It's just this other parameter that I could bring in there. So I think that's what he means on that.
Yeah, it probably is, and I'd say for a practicing thing with speed and quantity, totally, if you can somehow get quantity in there and speed, of course, yeah. One of my issues is that I've helped quite a few with snippets of code, and that's quantity, and speed hasn't been that much of an issue when you help people on the forum. But if you help people in some of the live chats like Discord or or whatever they were called when that was the big thing, speed becomes a thing as well. Because if you actually want to be the guy who helps, you need to be able to answer within some kind of time limit. Either the user asking will disappear if you take too long, or someone else will answer it, or whatever it might be. But yeah, there is at least a speed thing there. Yeah.
I'm laughing a little bit just because you're so right. People can get impatient, and you're like, it's a free forum where people are voluntarily helping, and they'll be like, it's been over 2 minutes. Why hasn't anyone replied to me? It's kind of funny, but you're right on the second one that you might have other people, answering it, even though you wanted to do it. But here's the thing. I was telling my son the other day, what were we? We're talking about something about helping other people. And I said, you know what? It's a good thing to help other people, but really, when you help other people, you're really helping yourself, right? You really, you feel so much better as a person, and that's not necessarily why you do it, but it really truly is. Like, you feel so much better about yourself when you help other people. And I know, Jackie, we were talking about this, and it's coming up in a couple slides, but it's a good segue to it, where how you decided to learn AutoHotkey, to the levels that you did. And it was basically saying, I'm going to start answering questions on the forum, regardless of if I have the need or not on that topic.
Yeah. That was what I was missing, right? We had the goal, and at one point, I truly had a goal, but it was very lopsided to interact with the browser. That was the only. And I had lots of time of where maybe a script was running and doing its thing, and I was just wanting to do more with AutoHotkey. So I used some of that free time that scripting was giving me, and when it wasn't at work and all of that stuff, to actually look at the forum. And instead of just reading, I actually sat there and tried to help people, because I felt great if I managed to solve the problem. Not so much because I was able to help the person. That was a good side effect, right? But if they had something that I hadn't done before, or if I was like, I think I can do that, I would try. And often you either did it quickly, and other times you just struggled to, but you learned.
Yeah, Eric chimed in here, and I watched it in one of these videos as well, but I've read it also before, that they did this experiment where there were two groups in a pottery class, and the one group was told, we want you to just turn in one project, but it's got to be the most ultimate looking, beautiful, pottery thing. And the other one, they were just to focus on volume, not necessarily what it looked like, but just focused on speed and getting stuff done, and they were going to go by the weight. And what was interesting was at the end of the class, the best looking, pottery was from the one that focused on the speed, not the ones that focused on the prettiness of it, or however you want to phrase it, right? And it was because, and especially, right, because it takes practice. When you're learning something new, it takes practice. And so just by doing it more and more and more, you build up, it's like writing as well. That's where I read this from, was that copywriting stuff. It talked about it was, once you get better and better at writing, in the long run, you'll find it's so much easier to write. And I think coding's the same way.
Yeah, I'd say currently I'm doing most of my coding in my free time, because I've gotten a job where I don't need to code as much, which is both good and bad. But yeah, I love what I do, but still I can feel it now, where I'm not per se writing code each day, that you need to look for those quirks in AutoHotkey a bit more in documentation and stuff like that. Because if you just keep doing it, keep having it both in your hands, and keep extending your knowledge by helping more and more people, yeah, practice really does make perfect, so to speak.
And that's actually one thing I would say is, and I've read this in other books too, is it doesn't mean you shouldn't try, aim for a good thing, right? Imperfect practice, leads to imperfect things. So having your goal clear is really good, because in the long run, we don't expect you to, when you're practicing, to have that, actually do it. But you should always be trying to improve yourself to get to the perfection thing.
Yeah.
All right. He also covered, he had 10 effective learning things, but they were very redundant, so I trimmed them down some. Let's pick up the pace a little here. Use spaced repetition, reinforced memorization, so flashcards, things like that. Jackie, you want to
research the skill and related topics. These can help identify important sub-skills. Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, I identify, and this one I like a lot, which we've talked about earlier, is identifying mental models and hooks and ways to categorize in your head the stuff you're learning. It really helps me relate it to something else. It's actually, I'll keep it, it falls in with the scaffolds and checklists, right? The scaffolding too is also that mindset of where things are categorized, but then having checklists of when you're going to start working on stuff, of here are the things that I'm going to do, right? That I do every time, or that I have, that, having a nice, clear, outline, that it's a great way to make sure you're efficient when you are learning. Jackie, once you get to this one.
I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Talk to practitioners to set expectations. Gurus can help a lot and can give tips when you're stuck. Totally. I'd say if people didn't do that, and that's what I love, or often love about AutoHotkey, right, is that the light tone of most of the places that you can get to people practicing AutoHotkey. The tone is pretty light, and people are pretty willing to actually help new people. So let's say gurus, or whatever you want to call them, are pretty accessible. You don't need to have this high level of experience or skills in AutoHotkey to actually get access to some of the best people in AutoHotkey, whereas with some other languages, it just might seem almost impossible.
And you know what, actually, I think is a really critical point here. I mean, I think you're spot on, Jackie, but it's also really important that the person that you do have as your guru that's helping you isn't too far above you, because sometimes when, like I said, I work a lot with Maastricht, right? And he'll write some stuff. 90% of the time, maybe 95% of the time, I can follow it. I can't write it, but I can follow it. But sometimes he writes stuff that's so condensed and so advanced that I'm like, I don't even know how to troubleshoot it, right? And that's a problem, because I'm going to be the one on the hook for getting this thing, when things go wrong. So my point being is, you don't necessarily want to find someone that's way over your head, because they're going to offer up solutions. Actually, I remember, Jackie, you gave me one solution. This is years ago, before we knew each other. On the forum, you gave me a solution, and I'm like, what the hell is that? It was where you were storing the links in the very first line. You were storing the links, the count of the links, and then using a while loop or something. And I'm like, what are you doing here? But you use the double parens to first capture the count and then do something on the outside. I forget exactly how it was. Then you explained it. I'm like, oh, okay, I can sort of see it now. But at the time, it just baffled me. And of course, that's not what you want. Your guru should be explaining it at your level.
We were using a dated, I don't know if it's a dated way, but we're using a loop to actually loop over specific elements on a page. So we wanted only the inputs, and then we were storing the count of the inputs to loop that amount of times, because you weren't actually able to use a for loop on that element. Yeah,
right.
But yeah, I do remember which code you're talking about, at least.
Yeah, but anyway, it's a good point to make sure they're, you know, at a good level for you, right? And Jackie's saying there's plenty of them out there, right? There's a ton of people that that are happy to help, and also it makes sure that they are learning as well, right? Because of course they have to know it well enough to explain it to somebody else.
Yeah, exactly. Why if you always go in with your own level for people who are new or just starting out or asking questions, if you can't move down in complexity or learning curve might even be a word to use there, they'll just be put off. Don't think they'll actually be able to learn it. Yeah.
All right, let's get the last, this one's specific about AutoHotkey, right? So using flashcards to learn vocabulary and concepts, that's one of those just things in general. When you're learning new terms, when you're trying to study a new language, whether it's another actually spoken language or a programming language, and they use different terms that you're not familiar with, it takes you a while to, you know, every time someone mentions the word, like, you have to recall what that word means. Meanwhile, of course, you know, if they're speaking, they're gone, and you're trying to remember what that even meant. So, you know, write some flashcards out and just start learning the concepts. Then, you know, the best thing to do is, you know, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, like bite-sized learning. You know, shrinking it down is a much easier way to actually process the stuff that you learn. Decide how deep you really want to go. Learn to focus. You know, learn on a function or learning a class versus writing it from scratch. So, look, sorry. The point there is, when I first started learning functions, I didn't have to learn how to write a function. I had to learn how to use a function. Later, I learned how to actually write a function, and even then, I didn't learn how to use like a byref command or having a static variable or whatnot, right? Those were things that later, after I got better, I started incorporating into my scripts. Let me get the next one, and then Jackie, you can, well, actually, let me get the next two, and then you can switch over. So the next one I'm very passionate about, like, find as many different channels as you can, because we learn best, you know, in the more, we all learn differently. If you know the way you learn, use that source. But generally speaking, it's even better if you can incorporate like print as well as video and listening to things and then writing things and speaking it and highlighting. Like when I have a book, I highlight, you know, the stuff in it. One is I can go back later and find it, but two, just by highlighting it, it helps me remember it better. And then go ahead, Jackie.
Yeah, I'm just talking to these points because within reason, almost all of these things were available to me when I started. There were images, there were video, there was stuff written, but there wasn't really anybody to talk to using your actual voice vocabulary in that way. You could write quite a lot, but you couldn't really talk to anybody about it. Mm-hmm. I couldn't, because I didn't have anybody in my network who were actually either coders or using AutoHotkey or anything like that. So really, I ended up actually downloading some videos and having them use them as a podcast, just so I could go out and shop and still be listening to stuff. Mm-hmm. There wasn't as much available at that time, but yeah, I still wanted to think AutoHotkey even when I wasn't actually at the computer. And to me, that meant a lot, and I was kind of missing someone to bounce ideas and stuff off of. Whereas,
Yeah, which has to do with the next one, which I was going to say. So I think a lot of you guys have heard, but my friend Dr. Cook, and this is even before we did AutoHotkey, we were doing stuff with SPSS, which is statistics. Every year we would take what we called was a Codekeishon, and we would get together for like usually around 5 days of actual, like 12 hours a day we'd be programming. And so all we would do we would stop for lunch and dinner, but like we just woke up and started, working on whatever. And we hit it really hard. It was a total immersion. We usually had a very clear goal of what we're like, we're going to learn macros, or we're going to learn this type of thing, right? Or one time it was Python, or then it was applying Python and statistics. But we said, this is what we're going to learn. And then what was great was we'd be going along, and then we would kind of split off, and he would take like one area and I'd take another, and we'd work through it, and then he could share what he learned with me and vice versa. Or if he was having trouble with something, I could help him, or vice versa. It's really great to have someone that's kind of in it. It's like a workout buddy, right? They're in it with you, and it makes it also helps you, like the workout buddy, right? Make sure that you follow through and do it, instead of just saying, oh, what does it matter? I'll just, I'll do it tomorrow.
I would love to have access to someone to do like a Codekeishon with, right? I've tried to do that with people in my normal day-to-day network, and I had quite a hard time of doing it. I found one project maybe 2 years ago where I might actually have started on it because of one of my friends' interest in it, and he didn't actually go into the coding, but just having him there to conceptualize and come with ideas and try to explain how I was doing it in code, and it gave me quite a lot. Even if he wasn't a coder, but he had an interest in the actual goal, so to speak. And he wasn't just someone who wanted the end result, but he wanted to, so that helped me quite a good.
Yeah, I Maestrieth, he's been rewriting AutoHotkey Studio again. He's coming up with this new way for creating GUIs. And he was telling me he spent all week, 8 hours a day working on the stuff, and he's hitting walls. And you want to jump on, he is light years ahead of me as a programmer. But I said, you want me to jump on a call and you can explain it to me, because often just explaining it to someone, can help you figure it out and solve it, right? And that's what I'm kind of like you saying. I was going to be like your friend there, of like, look, even though I'm not at your level, I can still listen to what you're saying and talk through, would you think about it this way, right? Or it sometimes it helps.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I take the next one here, find or create a structure for what you want to learn, like a Udemy course, tutorials, all of the rest.
Table of contents. Yeah.
Table of content in a book, YouTube, whatever. Totally. If you can actually do some of these first steps that we have, put in a goal, like maybe you don't take, I want to learn AutoHotkey. It might be too arbitrary, right? But if you want to learn a specific part of AutoHotkey, or if you want to solve a specific task, and you think that AutoHotkey can help you do it, you can create a structure for you to learn it, but solve the task at the same time, right? So you can really get some stuff done, and you could probably solve most problems within 20 hours if you had true focus and a good enough structure to get there.
Yeah. So to reiterate, and this is like, for me, what I think of having 40 minutes for me in the morning, followed by 20 minutes at the end of the day to help kind of go over what I learned that day, having a clear topic to learn, beginning by writing pseudocode, which means it's not actually the code for AutoHotkey. You're just writing what it's supposed to do. And that just helps you also get you started writing, define clear goals. And then at the end of the week, go back and review what you've learned. And then at the end of the month, go back and review what you've learned. These are all asterisk, because when I was talking to Dr. Cook, he was saying flashcards and this end of the week and end of the month and the next day, all the stuff, every time you retrieve from your memory, you're helping cement the pathways from the neurons, making the connections, and it helps it cement better into your mind. And that's why it helps you retain it better.
Yeah, I think that it was Eric in the chat that mentioned something just to that effect with don't just try and learn A for A and A and A and A and A. No, try and learn some B and some C and go back and forth a bit. So you don't just always retrieve that one thing that you're trying to. So yeah, you need to have some kind of structure so that you can move on, but then remember to go back to some of the
Yeah, good point, Eric. I remember now you saying go back to the A, but I hadn't put it together yet. You're right. All right, and the last one are just some words to live by. So this is one of my favorite ones. The best place to start, without question, is just to start. Right? I'll put an explicative in here. Or Jackie and I were talking the other day, and I'm like, look, version 1 is infinitely better than version 0. Right? If you never actually do something, it doesn't have any chance. Just get started on it. The old saying, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. Right? keep at it. Don't worry about your first draft. Just start writing. Right? Even the best programmers, I talked about this earlier, rewriting the scripts over and over often. The other thing is don't stress. Here's the other big really thing is I want to emphasize. It's one of the things I think why I'm good at learning is I have an amazing amount of self-confidence because I know I can learn anything, and I know just because I don't know something, I don't mind asking questions because we were all there, right? Just because Jackie is a better programmer than I'm not embarrassed that I don't know stuff, and I'll ask, and I know you guys have seen me in webinars, I'd be like, what are you doing there? I didn't know that, because we're all learning, right? Don't ever be embarrassed. It's anyone. I get really, I don't want to say upset, but it's almost angry at people that are cocky and act like you should know stuff, right? Or that they're smarter than you. If I hadn't spent the same amount of time and energy that you have in learning the stuff, I would be at that level too. It's ridiculous. So don't let it stress you out if you don't know stuff, right? We're all learning. So
yeah, I've even hit that one where I would put other people in a field on kind of like a pedestal, like. They know this so much better than me, so I probably shouldn't act as if I know what I'm talking about. And then it turns out if you actually tell them what you know, it wasn't as bad. As you said yourself, Joe, if you're still learning, that's totally acceptable, and it should be. So even if they know more than you, they should really, maybe they shouldn't absolutely take you under the wing, but you should be able to come with your knowledge level to them without being ridiculed or anything like that. So yeah, absolutely.
And then the other one, which I didn't put the quote in here, but who was it? Thomas Edison, I think he said, when he was trying to invent the light bulb, when the reporter, I didn't realize at the time, virtually all of science, all the scientists thought an electric light bulb was never going to happen, right? And here, at his 5,000th try, he still failed. And this is when some guy interviewed him and said, how do you feel? You failed 5,000 times. And he says, no, I'm 5,000 times closer to actually succeeding, right? That was his mindset. If I remember right, it's something close to this. He said, someone asked, how could you have gotten further? And he says, if I can learn how to fail twice as fast, right, I will be further ahead, right? It's really hard to learn by doing stuff right. The human brain and everything, we learn by doing stuff wrong, and then we learn what to fix, right? That's how the vast majority of stuff happens.
And then we learn what to fix, because we don't want to end up in the Einstein quote. I can't remember which was, but where he says people who keep doing the same thing over and over again. Yeah, they're crazy, or something like that.
This last one, I posted the link in the chat here. It was a really inspiring, for me, a very inspiring video of how discipline, it's discipline. It's not motivation. It's discipline that actually drives you to succeed. And so again, I'm hammering on it, be structured in what you're, have a clear goal, write it out, book, which I think it was on the slides. I don't know if we mentioned it, book time in your calendar, right? To make sure you do it, because if you know, it's doing those things that and tell people about it too, right? Because the more people you tell, now suddenly you're committed.
Yeah, I'd say absolutely discipline and motivation can both go hand in hand. I think with good discipline and a strong motivator, you can do it twice as fast, right? Where if you only have one of them, yeah.
Which gets back to summarizing up is look, you know, hopefully if you keep at it, you'll learn. It's a steep learning curve, but by having a structured approach, you're gonna do better on that learning curve than you would if you didn't have a structured approach, right? You'll still end up learning it. Yeah, you can learn AutoHotkey in 10 years if you do 1 hour, you know, a week, or a 1 hour a month maybe. But it's going to take a long time, and you keep forgetting stuff, and it never cements in. But by having a very clear structure, and these are the goals, this is what I want to do, you'll be much more productive at learning it quicker.
True.
All right, let me. I'm going to stop recording, and then we'll start it back up. I don't know if anyone has any questions that, or if not, hold on, let me stop.